Good morning. My name is Claire Clark and I am from Dynham. We are supporting Highlands and Islands to deliver this event today. It's great to have you all with us for this next session in our NEXUS webinar series. A very warm welcome to you all. Before I pass you over to Andrea McCall from HIE, I'd just like to spend a minute explaining how we will run today's webinar. As an audience member, you are automatically muted, but we have a couple of ways for you to get actively involved. You can use your question box at any point throughout the webinar, and we will pick up as many as we can during the Q&A. You'll also see an icon called the raised hand icon, and during question time, if you've got a mic and you want us to take you off mute so you can connect directly with our speaker, then just click on that icon and we'll get you connected. And finally, we always want to promote knowledge sharing and collaboration, so we do record every session. We will, of course, share this recording after the event so you can watch again or share with anyone else you think may be interested. That's all from me now. I'll pass you on to Andrea, who will introduce today's speaker. Andrea.
Thank you, Claire. Thanks for the welcome today. So yes, I'm Andrea McCall and I work in the Life Sciences team at Highlands and Islands Enterprise in Inverness. And just to let you know a little bit more about the NEXUS webinar series, we established the webinars to find out more about what's going on really in the life sciences, health and technology community in our region. And it's a good opportunity to meet new people and make connections. And in case you don't know, NEXUS is our co-working space on Inverness campus based within the building called Solasta House. And it's really a place to bring together life sciences and technology companies that can co-locate and collaborate. And NEXUS is funded by the Inverness and Highland City Region deal and European funding. But without further ado, I just want to move over to welcoming our speaker, Helen, who joined us, I think currently from Glasgow, but actually her business is also based in Shetland. So there's a strong island story here, I think, because you manage and run a global company from a Scottish island. So that's amazing. So really looking forward to hearing more about what you have to tell us about regulating medicines and medical devices today, and how Brexit and also COVID, I guess, have impacted on what's going on. So really looking forward to finding out more. So over to Helen.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Andrea, and nice to meet everybody virtually. Okay, so I'm going to start. I entitled my talk "Sausage Wars and the Art of Regulating Medicines and Devices" for two reasons. One is there's an analogy between the food supply situation post-Brexit and also the medicines and devices supply situation post-Brexit. And I think if I had entitled my talk "The Art of Regulating Medicines and Devices," you might all have gone, ah, and want to go to sleep. So I thought I'd give you a bit of a zippy title and then hopefully go through one or two bits and pieces that might be of interest to you. Regulatory affairs for both medicines and devices is a huge area. And so I can't talk about everything today, but in 25 minutes, I hope I'm going to give you a bit of a taster and some things to think about. Okay, so that's just me. So why sausage wars? As I said, the supply situation for medicines and medical devices with the Northern Ireland Protocol and post-Brexit and so on has been a considerable concern for the regulatory agencies and for the ministries of health, not only in the UK, but also in Ireland and in other EU member states. So I'll pick some of those points up as I go. Okay, so Northern Ireland Protocol, well, it impacts all goods supplies, including medicines, and the sausage situation was that under the new regulations, you could only send frozen meats into the EU, but under the Good Friday Agreement and the Good Friday Peace Accord, there wasn't allowed to be a hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. And the same situation has existed with medicines. The basic rules for the EU at the moment are that if you send medicines from the UK into the EU, you have to retest them and re-release them before you can put them on the market. And there are various wonderful examples of why that's an incredibly difficult thing to do. And so that at the moment we have this bizarre situation where Northern Ireland in regulatory terms is part of the European Union, and Great Britain, that's England, Scotland and Wales, is not. So we have to manage with that. So the challenge of Brexit has been to take a really complicated regulatory system for medicines and medical devices and unravel it and re-ravel it a different way while still operating within the systems. I described it to somebody who asked me about it as a bit like unpicking a sweater and trying to knit a hat with the bit that you've unpicked at the same time. So it's quite a challenge. And the reason why we had and have a complicated regulatory system in the EU is due to politics and money. In 1985, when the European medicines regulations were being developed, there was a decision that everything was going to go through a European medicines agency, and everything would go through there and we'd get pan-European licenses and so on. And then the individual countries realised that they would be left with the old-fashioned, slightly hairy licenses, and that a lot of their income came from new applications. And so we ended up with a complicated system where we have 4 different licensing procedures that we can follow, one of which is pan-European. The other 3 are dependent on the circumstances of the application that you wish to make. So politics and money drives the complexity of the pharmaceutical and device licensing systems at the moment. It's worth having a look at the UK pharmaceutical industry and why the government was so concerned about the impact on medicines and medical device supply. It's the 3rd largest industry in the UK. It has a whopping great turnover, which continues to increase. And prior to Brexit, nearly half of all of the EU R&D spend in pharmaceuticals was occurring in the UK. And so the R&D functions are really concerned about that because they're thinking, well, they were getting EU funding for a lot of these new projects, new innovations, and the UK government possibly doesn't have the same large pot to support the R&D going forward. So universities and innovation companies bringing very new treatments into the UK, very concerned about that at the moment. And I won't read through this, but it's worth noting that 2 of the top 15 pharma companies in the world, GlaxoSmithKline and AstraZeneca, have their headquarters in the UK, and they still do. 41% of everything that's produced in the UK is exported, and year on year up to 2019, 3.6% growth, so significantly over inflation. So it's a healthy industry for unhealthy people, unfortunately, and we're very concerned about its future as we go ahead. We're optimistic and concerned at the same time, I think. So pre-Brexit, we're all part of a single market. There was free movement of medicines. There was EU and national procedures. I said 4 different procedures. And the underlying principle behind at least a couple of those procedures is that one country within the EU did all of the donkey work in reviewing a new medicines application, or one notified body for a medical device within the EU did all the donkey work to assess a medical device on behalf of all of the other member states. And then national licenses would be issued after that. So the UK is obviously no longer in that club anymore. And the European Medicines Agency, its role, instead of dealing with a large span of different types of products, is primarily focused on high-tech and biotech products. So they've been heavily involved with the COVID vaccines, monoclonal antibodies for treating various cancers, and there's a whole range of different drug areas that have to go through the European Medicines Agency. And oncolytic viruses, for example, are a very exciting area at the moment, where you infect somebody with a virus that only infects a particular type of tumour cell in order to treat it. So a bit Star Trek and science fiction going on there at the moment. Okay, it was based in London. And the important point about the European Medicines Agency is that all the staff, apart from the admin people, all the people who do the scientific assessment were loaned by the national regulatory agencies. So it's staffed by the national regulatory agencies, and the UK was a very much lead regulatory agency for providing staff. It was the lead national agency working with the European Medicines Agency, and they got a lot of money out of it because they were paid on the basis of providing support. Now it's based in Amsterdam. It's still resourced by the different member states, but the other member states have had to step up to the plate to get into the shoes of where the UK were, because the UK is no longer part of that process and is not able to influence it anymore. Okay, so here's another slide, a little bit of reiteration there. I think the important point is they got a lot of their self-funded money from working on applications that were going through the European Medicines Agency. And also, we only had one type of product license in the UK. We had a European license, but the national license was known as a product license. If you look on any medicines pack, you'll see PL and a number. That's the license number. Okay. For medical devices range from everything from glucose meters to X-ray machines, MRI machines, dental fillings, or 1,000,001 different. In fact, I can't think. There's more than 500,000 types of different medical devices in the European Union and in the UK, for that matter. And in order to regulate those, there aren't enough people in the regulatory agencies, so they delegate that assessment for most of the lower risk medical devices to commercial organisations called notified bodies, and they CE mark them, Conformité Européenne, CE mark them to show that they comply with various standards that are required. So we have the British Standards Institute. We used to have Lloyd's Register QA and SGS as 3 of the 58 notified bodies. And as a result of a legislative change in the EU, that's now dropped to we've lost at least 20 notified bodies out of that system. And that's another problem that we're trying to deal with at the moment. So as I said, for medical devices, we have the perfect storm of COVID limiting the commercial organisations from being able to assess applications, and for them to having to focus on assessing kits for testing for COVID. We have Brexit as a problem of, in the UK, there aren't enough notified bodies at the moment now. We've had to set up UK ones. British Standards Institute, for example, has set up in the Netherlands in order to perform their EU stuff, and is still based in the UK for doing the UK stuff. And then we have emerging new regulations in the medical devices arena, which were delayed by a year to May last year, the implementation of new medical device requirements, and the in vitro diagnostic regulations are in disarray at the moment. There's been a proposal to postpone them. They were supposed to be implemented this year, and that's simply because of COVID, because there aren't enough bodies to actually assess under the new regulations. It's a mess. It's currently a perfect storm. It really is. And that will ultimately lead to shortages in 2 or 3 years' time, I think. So, so as far as medical devices are concerned, the MHRA, the UK regulatory agency, assesses the higher risk medical devices, things like radioactive implants and things like that. And previously we had CE marking along with the rest of the EU. We now have CA marking because they're not able to register and assign CE marks to something if they're not in the EU. So what happens if you're not in the EU or in the European Economic Area? So the European Economic Area is the EU plus Norway, Iceland and Liechtenstein. Not that anybody registers anything in Liechtenstein, it's too small. Okay, so some of the things, for example, if you've got a medicine, you've got to retest, as I mentioned, as you come into the EU. You've got to have an EU-based license holder. You've got to have an EU legal presence, and you've got to have your safety monitoring processes inside the EU, and the applications have to be submitted by legal entities. So it's a single closed European market, as you would expect. Want to protect their own market. And the same thing happens with medical devices. You know, CE marking is EU by an EU notified body. You have to have an EU legal entity to supply. You have to have a local representative, and your safety monitoring has to be within the EU. So where does that leave us? So when people say to me, you know, have we got to the post-Brexit stage? Well, the answer is we're still trundling up the little yellow brick road. We haven't got there yet. And in fact, the little yellow brick road's got quite a lot of kinks in it at the moment. And sometimes you come around a corner and something else hits you that you're not expecting. So, and I think that's one of the issues that they're finding with the Northern Ireland Protocol. Okay, and the consequences of Brexit have been quite significant. Since 2016, large amount of pharmaceutical manufacturing has moved out of the UK and across into the EU. If you've got to retest and re-release product on entry into the EU, and you're manufacturing drug products, as we call medicines, in the EU, then is it easier to just make the drug, the basic drug substance, the active moiety in the UK, and then export it into the EU and manufacture your tablets or whatever in the EU, because then you don't have the additional cost of re-release and retesting and re-release. So a significant fragment of the pharmaceutical industry has actually upsticked and moved into places like Spain, where in fact, you know, the cost of employment is lower, and so the cost of goods ultimately is lower. And notwithstanding all the regulatory things that have to be done in order to change that. So there has been a migration of some aspects of the pharmaceutical industry and the device industry into the EU and away from the UK. So I don't know what size, what actual impact that's had on the pharmaceutical industry until the next lot of Office for National Statistics and the National Audit Office information comes out. We still don't know, but as you can see, you know, the usual pathway for R&D, we do R&D, research and development in the UK, and then new medicines, development of the formulation in the UK, the tablets or the solution or the injection or whatever, and then the drug substance manufacturer, so that's the drug that actually has the effect, and then the drug product, that's the medicines manufacturer. So the blue and the green boxes, some of those have moved over into the EU, and we've got an asymmetric situation at the moment, that if you send medicines into the EU, you have to retest and re-release, but the UK is accepting medicines from the EU without having to do that. So we've got to make sure that we maintain our medicine supply. Okay, and then the impact on the licenses of the Northern Ireland Protocol has become rather insane. So we used to have one product license, we now have 3. So we have one license. If you only want to sell in Scotland, England and Wales, you can have a PLGB license, and if you've had a European, pan-European EU license, that becomes a PLGB. Or you can have a PL, which is the existing one, which was England, Scotland, Ireland and Northern Ireland and Wales, or you can have a Northern Ireland license, which is from a EU regulatory procedure. So it's slightly bonkers at the moment, and it's 3 times as much work. Okay. And then I think it's important to look at the other side of the UK-Irish equation. Ireland is 1/12 the size in population, or less than 1/12 the size population of the UK. And it has a very small pharmaceutical industry, and it has a very small device industry, and it has a 20 billion euro trade deficit with the UK. So it's heavily reliant on UK for its medicines and its devices. So I remember in 2016 going to the Health Products Regulatory Agency in Dublin, and the senior member of the European Committee from Ireland saying to me, we are really worried about supply of medicines into Ireland, because typically what happens is medicines are made in the UK and they're automatically labelled for both the UK and Ireland. And if you have to retest going into Ireland, the population, frankly, may be too small for some types of treatments to make it financially worthwhile. And so, you know, Ireland is looking for a fudge in order to allow maintenance of their medicine supplies. Are really worried about it and continue to be worried about it. And I currently work in, one of the things I do is radioactive drugs, which are fascinating. But I work with a drug called fludeoxyglucose 18F injection. You can immediately forget that, but basically it's radioactive glucose, and it's used for positron emission tomography scanning. You can forget that, PET scanning, so looking for large tumours in cancer. It's got a half-life of less than 2 hours. So can you retest and re-release when you move from one place to another? Of course you can't. And Northern Ireland doesn't have a facility that manufactures this drug. So their cancer scanning centre in Belfast is completely reliant on supplies in from Dublin. So the UK government have gone, well, forget that, it doesn't matter. And actually, in the event that in Ireland, the Irish facility that manufactures this drug isn't able to supply, I think the Irish government will take a very broad and relaxed view about having supplies coming in, because what they can't do is stop their cancer scanning in Dublin, because they've got to, it's not feasible to test and re-release. It's just a stupid situation. Radiopharmaceuticals need to be exempted. Okay, so with medical devices, as I said, we've got the perfect storm. We've got parallel turmoil, if you like. We've got new legislation that's being enacted for both medical devices and in what they call in vitro diagnostic devices. These are things that you know, the finger prick tests for things, and the little keto sticks that you use for testing urine and so on. And then we've got in the UK, the government updated the Medicines Act to make it the Medicines and Medical Devices Act last year. And as I've already mentioned, that we've got CA marking going on now for medical devices in the UK. So what are our worries? Well, impact on R&D, future manufacturing and supply focus, you know, and the UK, I think in regulatory terms, and we're seeing this now very strongly from large pharma companies in Europe saying, well, okay, you know, we'll put the UK in the same box as Australia when we're developing new medicines and a new high-risk devices, because it's just too hard. So we'll put them in that box. And the MHRA, in response to that, God bless them, have decided, they've said, if you go through a European procedure and it's successful, we will implement what's called, it comes under CMD-CRP procedure, but it's actually basically called a reliance procedure, which says if you go through the European procedures and it's successful, and if you have a good file of quality, safety and efficacy information, we will recognise that, and they've got a 67-day procedure which says after you've got your European approval, you can then go for this, because otherwise the UK would be consigned to a corner as far as the other bigger pharmaceutical companies in Europe and even the medium-sized ones are concerned, in terms of getting the latest cutting-edge medicines when they're needed. So, you know, we're concerned about the direct impact of not being first on patients and disease management. So, as I said, MHRA has introduced new procedures for innovative medicines. They've introduced a thing called an ILAP, and they have an innovation office. So if you've got something really new, instead of going to the European Medicines Agency, you go to those people. The reliance procedure, which I've just explained, they're strengthening their ties with the US FDA. They already had good ties with the US FDA, and strengthening their ties with the Therapeutic Goods Authority in Australia, and to a lesser extent with the Japanese regulatory agencies, so that they can continue to be a big player, but outside the EU. And they're looking to actively support industry wherever they can in order to get new innovations onto the market. Okay. As far as we're concerned, okay, where does it sense us in terms of we're there to help keep up the medicine and device sausage supplies, if you like. So we've always operated for the last 20 years as a completely virtual entity. So actually when COVID turned up, it had no impact on us whatsoever, because most of our team work from home. We do have offices, but we mostly work from home. We work virtually, and our core activities are EU, but we do US, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, ANZAC, and obviously because we're based in the UK, we have a very close relationship with the MHRA, and we have until very recently had a Swiss business, and we've operated very closely with Swissmedic. So we also have a contract network across the UK, the EU. So we have, you know, I don't speak Latvian or Bulgarian or Hungarian or anything else. So we have local regulatory affairs to support that. And we provide, we use safety monitoring services in the EU, and we have a network. We're actually members of various networks for regulatory intelligence on changing new legislation and so on. So what we had to do, 2 days after the vote, 2 working days after the vote in 2016, we set up an Irish company. We could see that it was going to be impossible to operate properly as a UK business and maintain our market share and grow our business if we didn't have an EU presence. So we have an EU shell company in Cork in Ireland, so that we can maintain our service provision to EU customers. We can still be seen as being European by our clients, and that's important. We're finding when we go for business development meetings, that little thing of being able to say, yes, okay, we're UK based, but we have an EU business, makes a huge difference. Yeah. But of course, the downside of that is that you've got the cost of Irish accountants and Irish registration and dealing with the and if you were based anywhere else, Malta, for example, and Cyprus and Portugal, for example, were pitching really hard because they realised that UK-based companies were looking for additional EU locations to provide services and so on when we were looking to do that. So the challenges we faced is how to factor in the UK and explain this to clients. New procedures, we've all had to learn new procedures to operate and learn from them. And the timescales for these new procedures sometimes are a little bit woolly. And for medical devices, there's a huge crisis at the moment that there are not enough notified bodies in the UK. And it's taking much longer to get medical devices CE marked. And so that's going to have a long-term impact. In a couple of years' time, we could well have significant shortages of certain types of medical devices unless something's done about it. So ultimately, you know, the NHS and the patients will bear the pressure of any shortages that arise, but we're working really hard to try to prevent that. Okay, any questions?
That's great. Thanks so much, Helen. I'm just going to bring Andrea back on and we will go to audience Q&A. So we've had a couple of questions submitted already, but there's still time. So if you've got a question for Helen, then use your question box and we'll pick that up with Helen. So first question, I'm not sure, starting with the easiest question now, Helen, but first question is from Kerry. When will Brexit be over?
Sorry, probably well after I've retired. Realistically, I think it's going to take at least 5 years before things will get anywhere near settled down. You know, there will still be, we'll get all the major hurdles sorted and we'll get all of those tidied up, but there will continue to be bits of legislation that will need to be changed or situations that will turn up that have to be managed. So this is a long process. Okay, my prediction, my mystic, you know, when my crystal ball arrives in the post, I'll be able to tell you, but I think probably 2030 at the earliest.
Wow, that's actually shocking because that is not what I thought at all.
Okay.
That's so interesting.
Yeah,
okay.
No, it's going to be well, it's the consequences of Brexit will be sorted by 2030, I think. I'm sorry, I know that sounds terribly pessimistic, but I think there will be things that we haven't thought of that will take longer to fix than we expected.
What do you think? I'm afraid, like what? Like, give us a couple of examples.
There will be little bits of legislation that will come along and you suddenly realise that, oh, we can't do that anymore, but how do we do this and how do we fix it? And then there'll be an interim fix for it and then there'll be an eventual fix for it. Yeah, so I think the medical devices worries me the worst at the moment.
Okay.
That's where we go with that. Yeah.
Okay, next question from Douglas. How has the COVID impact, How has COVID impacted Brexit on medical devices?
Okay, the medical device, okay, just a little bit of explanation. There are two types of legislation in the EU primarily. One is a directive, which is an instruction to put something into your own national law, and the other one is a regulation, which is a mandated thing that everybody has to do within a particular time frame in the same way. And when I'm teaching about directives and regulations, I make everybody stand up, shake hands, and sit down again. And that's a regulation because everybody does it within the same time frame. And a directive is an instruction for somebody to do something within a particular time frame, but put it into their national law. And the medical devices regulation, the medical devices legislation has been until very recently a directive. And the reason it's been moved over to a regulation is because it was implemented very badly in a lot of countries. And there were all sorts of scandals, you know, the failure of breast implants, the failure of hip joints, lots of serious safety issues arising from poorly regulated processes for medical devices. And the medical device directive moving over to a regulation was due to take place on the 26th of May 2020 and had to be, because of COVID, was moved back a year to the 26th of May 2021. And the in vitro diagnostic directives moving over to a regulation were due to be implemented this year on the 26th of May. And there's a sort of fuzzy proposal at the moment that some of those changes will be implemented, but not all. And it's simply because products aren't being what they call grandfathered in. You can't take something that's got a CE mark at the moment and automatically get a CE mark under the new procedures. You have to reapply. So everything has to be revalidated, and there isn't the resource because of COVID. The notified body, we're short of notified bodies, and partly that's due to COVID, partly because the requirements for the notified bodies to perform their activities have become so much more complicated that some of them have decided not to bother. So LRQA, for example, just decided it wasn't going to bother anymore with medical devices and opted out of being involved. So yes, COVID has had a significant impact on implementing those laws. So a bit of a long-winded answer, sorry.
No, that was a great one. Thanks, Helen. Okay, next question is from Kate. Terrific, informative outline of the situation. Do you think politically the asymmetric nature of the approvals will be changed despite the adverse effect on supplies? And then also, why have the notified bodies reduced in number, gone out of business, or just moved to the EU?
Right, okay, so the first one, the asymmetric situation, I don't see the UK requiring that medicines coming into the UK be retested and re-released for quite some time. So the situation with the EU is what it is, but I don't think the UK has got to, and the National Health Service, for example, has got to be able to source the medicines that it needs to treat the diseases that they need to manage. And so there's potential delays with medicine supplies and potential issues with getting medicines in. I don't think the MHRA or the government in its larger form will look at changing that asymmetric situation at the moment. And to be honest, you know, the laws that we're operating to in the UK are the same as the EU laws, and therefore if a product is good enough to give to somebody in Belgium or France or Italy or Sweden or wherever, it's good enough to give to somebody in the UK. It's got the right quality, safety and efficacy associated with it. Notified bodies is another problem, and that's because the requirements for the regulation of notified bodies have got tougher, and some notified bodies didn't want to bother to continue, as I said, and the actual activities that the notified bodies are having to legislate has got more complicated. And so we've lost at least 20 notified bodies out of the system. And you know, when you take a group of 58 and you end up, well, hopefully we're going to end up with about 37 or 38, we hope. You know, when you do that and you've still got 500,000 different types of medical devices to regulate, you can see that timescales are going to get longer and it's going to get harder, and it's difficult to recruit people into those types of work at the moment because there's a shortage of experienced people anyway in that area.
Well, I was just, do you know what? I was just about to ask, can we not get more people? But you've answered that one as well.
Yeah, you need people with the right scientific expertise. Engineers, we need more female engineers and male engineers in there looking at medical devices. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I think we've got one more question from Claire. She's asking, can you share more examples of medicines or devices that were already impacted by the changes you're describing?
Oh, goodness. Well, it's difficult to do that without breaching confidentiality on things. But we do have some innovative high-risk medical devices that 18 months ago we would have said, you know, under the new requirements, it might take 6 to 9 months to get CE marking through, or up to 12 months to get CE marking through. Now we're looking at 2 years. Nope. So
Wow.
timescales have got longer and longer and longer and longer. Yeah. And for medicines, as I said, thankfully, because the MHRA have introduced this reliance procedure for getting some of the medicines approved on the basis of already having an EU approval, the extended timescale is gone. It typically takes 300 days, for example, for one of the procedures to get a medicine approved. So for the UK, it's 300 and add another 30 days on top of that, 397 days to actually get it into the approved for the UK. So the impact has not been quite so dramatic.
Okay, great. Thanks, Helen. One last question then from me. Could you tell us what's the most exciting or innovative device or medicine that you've worked on or worked with?
Oh goodness! At any one time, we have about 50 projects on the go. Some of them are updates of existing medicines. So, for example, taking a medicine that's approved for adults only, and then seeking regulatory approval for a formulation that's appropriate for children. So, for example, you can't give tablets to toddlers. You always have to have suspensions and things like that. So that's one end of the sort of thing that we do. Another area that we've worked in is active implantable radiological devices. So these are radioactive seeds for the treatment of solid tumours. And you can imagine that the manufacturing process for that is it requires a sense of humour. You know, and you're putting stuff into a nuclear reactor for 2 weeks and waiting for it to come out and trying to do clinical trials. And a challenge that you sometimes have with radioactive stuff is in the summer, one of the places that we use for radiating stuff is a nuclear reactor in Mole in Belgium. And in the summer, when water's short, they cut down the amount of water that's cooling the reactor. And as a result of which, the medicine comes out too hot. And so you've got people with severe liver cancer, for example, waiting for an implant, and they can't have one at the scheduled time, because they've got to wait 3 or 4 weeks for the radioactive material to get cool enough to be able to be implanted. So now I always find those things absolutely fascinating, yeah, things like that. But we also work in areas like monoclonal antibodies, things that biological substances that target tumours and so on. So yeah, that's another type of area that we work in, and all sorts of really interesting medical devices. Yeah, medical devices for the prevention of transmission of COVID. It's another area we're working in at the moment. Yeah. Medical devices, just to clarify, medical device is something that has a principally physical mode of action. So you can treat somebody for a disease by just doing physical mode of action. A good example would be if you go into Boots and they have their cold and flu defense product. That's a medical device, because what it does is it puts a layer of a gluey layer up your nose that contains various ingredients in that prevents the viruses from sticking to your nasopharyngeal orifice, and that's a physical mode of action. Yeah, so yeah, it's very fascinating, some of the ways that different
It's so
medical devices
interesting.
work. Yes, I've
We
been doing this job for 35 years and I never get bored, and I never have the same day ever. Yeah.
It's amazing. It's so interesting. We could talk to you for hours, but unfortunately, that
Yeah.
we're running out of time. I'll bring Andrea back on. Andrea, have you got any questions for Helen?
Yeah, well, just I guess a quick business-related question, more, because obviously you've obviously got a virtual company, as you were saying, you're located in many different places, but obviously Shetland is one of the key locations for
Yes,
you.
that's
So I
our
don't know.
headquarters. Yeah.
Yeah. So how has that been for you? Having a headquarters on a Scottish island.
Well, surprisingly, oh no, why would I be surprised actually? Shetland, I find that the Highlands and Islands has a high percentage per head of population, I think, a higher percentage of graduates, I think, than anywhere else. And we've been, we were looking last year, we wanted to employ a graduate, and in very short order, a graduate trainee to come in and work on our publishing systems with another lady who's from Shetland. And within the course of about 5 weeks, we found, we've got a graduate who's got a first in neurosciences, who's fitted into understands the science of what we're doing very quickly. And I just find it amazing that you go into an area. I've lived in Shetland for 20 years. But I'm always surprised about how scientifically there are some really good brains in these remote areas, that are really enthusiastic about doing some of the stuff that we do. Yeah. So our publishing and submissions manager, Diane, she has a degree in biochemistry, and when she was having her children, went off and got a first in information technology. I just think, wow, these are bright people. Yeah, so we're actually very lucky. Yeah, I think the Highlands and Islands is a good resource for STEM type projects, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
And it's been surprisingly easy to find people when you need them.
That's great. No, I mean, I think it is becoming more and more obviously possible, I think, to find the right people even in unusual places, shall we say, because lots of businesses are looking for remote options for their workforce, and people just live in different places, but as you're saying, the expertise and the skills are there, I think.
Yeah, I think one of the important points is, and I never understood it. I worked in big pharma until 2000, and I never understood it, why people who are doing essentially research, data researching and things like that, why you have to have a bum on a seat in an office 9 to 5. It doesn't make any sense at all. And we've been entirely virtual since 2000, and people talk via Skype and Zoom and on the phone and so on, and a lot of our clients we've never met. We work with, we've got one client that I've worked with for 12 years. I've actually never met any of the team because everything is done completely virtually, and it works, and people then have time to fit their home life and their work life together. And I think it's, I think even working 9 to 5 doesn't make any sense to me. When you're working globally, if somebody's got a project that's going to take 20 hours, and it sounds very flippant, but I actually don't care what time they choose to work it, as long as we all agree and the work gets done in the time scale and to the quality that we're looking for, and that people, when they need to interconnect with one another, that they do. Yeah, I think COVID's been great for that. I think people have suddenly realised that actually they don't need to go into, some people do for the social side of it, and that's very important. But in terms of actually getting the work done, you don't have to be there. It doesn't matter.
Yep. No, I completely agree with you. I think it has opened up some opportunities there, and it doesn't apply to everybody, as you say, but it will work for some people. So I think that will be a positive thing that's hopefully come out of COVID.
Yeah, I absolutely see that as a very positive thing. Yeah.
Perfect. So thank you very much, Helen. I mean, that was so interesting, and yeah, we could keep talking for a lot longer, I think, because all your knowledge and all your expertise, just, so much interesting stuff going on. So I really envy your job in the sense that you get to find out about all these interesting products and medicines and medical devices.
Yeah.
But, thank you so much.
One last point. I think we were talking earlier on about when we had a little chat beforehand about COVID and the timings, and we did say there's one thing that people don't know and has not been publicised, is that the week after lockdown occurred in 2020, the Medicines Regulatory Agency went to a 7-day week, and that's why we got the COVID vaccine through so fast. They worked 10-hour days, 7 days a week to get it done.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're right in saying I don't think many people know about this, and it's really important to realise that the effort was put in to make it happen.
Yes, and that's why the head of the agency, June Rain, got her damehood. Not for just being head of the agency, but those guys absolutely bust a gut. I remember in May getting an email from the MHRA on a Sunday morning and thinking, God, good grief, where did that come from? And they said, no, we're working a 7-day week. We've got to do this. Yeah, and that's why we got in first.
Yeah. No, it's fantastic to see that, if you need to get it done, it is possible if you put the hours in. So that's fantastic. Thanks for sharing that as well.
Yeah, no, I think people should realise that. Yeah,
I think so. So great, thank you, Helen. As I said, it's been great to have you, and really delighted to make time to speak to us today. So really, really interesting. I just wanted to draw everyone's attention to our next webinar. The next one is actually not a NEXUS webinar. It's one that we run as part of our Business to Healthcare program. But just it has a remote, kind of a related theme, so I just wanted to share it with you all. It's around innovation in remote and primary care, and it's a company showcase, really. So it's 8 companies who will tell us more about their developments, their technologies, their services. And if you want to join us on the 2nd of February, you can sign up on the High events page that is on the screen just now. And one more thing I wanted to mention as well, which is our Pathfinder Accelerator program. So this is a business support program that's open to small companies located in the Highlands and Islands. And for the next cohort, we're starting in March, and we're actually looking specifically for companies who are active in animal health and aquaculture. So if you're interested or want to find out more, get in touch. The website is just hi.co.uk/pathfinder, and you can also get in touch with our consultants and our coaches through the email address shown here, and just arrange a one-to-one call just to talk through any questions or talk through anything you want to find out more about. So yeah, that's my 2 calls for action for you to maybe join us in the future as well. But thank you again, Helen. It's been great to have you. And thank you, Claire, for hosting us today as well.
That's great. Thanks, Andrea. On behalf of Highlands and Islands Enterprise, thank you very much for a great session today, Helen. And a final big thank you to everyone that came in to join the webinar. Our post-event survey will pop up straight after this session, so if you can spare a couple of minutes, it would be great if you could complete that for us. Thank you very much for your time and have a great day.